All right, as I mentioned earlier today, the House of Representatives passed the National Defense Authorization Act, getting the $800+ billion measure off to the president. Some Republicans, I also got to go to the Senate. Some Republicans are claiming the bill is a win for them as it contains language ending the COVID shot mandate for military service members. It does not, however, reinstate service members previously dismissed for not getting the jab. Joining me now to discuss this year's NDAA is Mike Brest, who covered this as a defense reporter for the Washington Examiner. Mike, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so the NDAA passed today with the House approving actually $45 billion more than what the president requested. This now goes to this, it's got to make one more stop at the Senate. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So give us there was some drama surrounding this. Tell us about it.
So it's important to know that this is must-pass legislation. This is legislation that is passed every year for about 60 years now. And so some years are more contentious than others, obviously. And we saw, a moderate amount of contention this year. And we heard a number of different debates. And one of the big things that is relevant with this specific NDAA is that, as we know, right now Congress is being led by Democrats, but in a couple of weeks, come the new year, it'll be a Republican-led House. And so given that nature, the Republicans had a little bit of leverage in what they wanted to see done, combined with the fact that the way they passed this legislation required 2/3 of the vote. So there was overwhelming support for it with the compromises that they were able to reach.
Now, Mike, as I mentioned, it does stop the vaccine mandate, but it does nothing for those members who were forced out. So this has been an issue for many in the Senate, conservative Republican members of the Senate. Could it run into some obstacles in the Senate?
I think it's always possible that some, 11th hour hurdles could come up. But at the same time, it does seem at this moment that this is a compromise that both sides have been able to get behind. And it's important to know that we are talking about a very small percentage of the armed forces. DoD reiterated earlier this week that over 95% of the armed services have been fully vaccinated. And so while we hear numbers that are in the thousands, they really do represent, 1 or 2% of the entire military.
The bill almost got a little sideways because Democrats were wanting to attach through a rule a vote on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. How were they able to negotiate and navigate through it? Was that the supermajority vote that was required?
So that's part of it. Between both parties, especially members who are actually not on the Armed Services Committee, oftentimes bring up a number of different proposals that they want to see brought into the bill. And so this was just one of those examples. There are plenty of them. We saw the vaccine mandate come up last year in negotiations, and there were rumors at the time that could be on the table. Ultimately, it didn't, and now it is this time around. But it's part of the nature of how a must-pass bill goes back and forth between the two parties.
Yeah, there's not that many measures that are must-pass, meaning that, for things to continue, it has to happen. We'll see this with the CR coming up, the continuing resolution. Unlikely they're going to get the support they need for omnibus. Maybe they will. I don't know. But they've got to at least do a short-term funding probably to get there. That's one of those measures people like to attach things to because they have to pass. I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the next Congress, especially in the next NDAA. When the Republicans have control of the House, I think they're going to be using that a lot more to push forward pro-military policies that they would like to see into law.
I think that's very possible, and we've heard some inclinations or some indications that could be the case. I do think it's also interesting you brought up the point of a continuing resolution, because we've heard from a number of DoD officials who have said, including Secretary Austin, who has said a continuing resolution is not good enough because a continuing resolution continues funding at previous levels, and DoD has, like they do many years, increased its funding so that they could continue to do new programs. And so a continuing resolution would put those things on hold and just keep funding at the current levels.
It's in talking to a number of Republican members, more on the conservative side of the ledger, they don't want to give up that ability to fund the government in the next year once they're in the majority in the House, because that's one of the few tools they have to rein in the Biden administration.
Absolutely. And so it really is sort of a push and pull situation where, as you mentioned, Republicans have talked about using this to their advantage. And the problem is, to get to that point, it would require a CR, which, as I said, Secretary Austin has been pretty, publicly against.
But he was also against lifting the vaccine mandate, and that didn't seem to make a difference.
Absolutely. Both Secretary Austin and President Biden said that they still supported the vaccine mandate. Now, there are some Democrats who have come out and said that they don't think it's necessary anymore, which is why they are willing to compromise on it. But only time will tell to see how that rift will continue to grow as the NDAA goes through its process and as this policy in particular gets lifted and the effects of it move forward.
All right, very good. Michael Brest, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate your insight.
Thank you for having me.